Under the direction of Antonio Carlos Andrade and produced by the Lisbon Players, an English-language theatre company in Lisbon, the play Things I Know to Be True goes on stage in Teatro do Bairro from April 19th till April 30th, 2023.
Because this play is reaching an English-speaking audience, we are delivering this manifesto in English with Portuguese subtitles.
Written in 2016 by Andrew Bovell, Things I Know to Be True is an exploration of family dynamics and includes a trans character. A cisgendered actor, Ricardo Francisco Jacob, was cast to play the role of Mia, a trans woman who starts the play pre-coming out and transitions through the course of the play. The practice of casting cis actors to perform trans roles is known as transfake.
Transfake is a form of epistemic injustice, a type of discrimination in which trans people's capacity to know or to describe their experience is silenced and excluded, leading to further marginalization. Transfake serves to exclude trans people from labour and self-representation and contributes to the maintenance of prejudiced stereotypes, ridicule and harmful mischaracterizations of trans experiences.
The term transfake was coined in 2016 through the work of Renato Carvalho and Monart, Movimento Nacional de Artistas Trans, with the text Manifesto Representatividade Trans Já. Transfake is a form of structural violence and exists within a history of systemic oppression against trans and non-binary people. Though the term transfake was coined within a Lusophonic context, its critical sentiment exists as well within the cultural sector and academia in the English-speaking world. This can be seen in the work of the contemporary philosopher Miranda Fricker, as well as within the work of other academics.
In the original production of Things I Know to Be True, the role of Mia was played by a cis actor. The cultural and political framework has shifted internationally since the play's initial production in 2016 and increasingly includes a critical reflection informed by the trans community.
This can be seen internationally in contemporary casting decisions which involve trans actors playing the role of Mia, and in a rewrite of the script done in 2019 by the playwright Andrew Bovell in consultation with a trans person.
Andrew Bovell has yet to formally take a position on casting decisions for this play, as well as which version of the script is available and should be used. Although the 2019 adaptation updated the language in Things I Know to Be True to be more sensitive to the trans community, this version of the script is still not widely available.
As trans activists, we call on Andrew Bovell to honor the work he did with trans people to rewrite the script and stop profiting from the transphobic language in his original draft of the play. We also call on him to stop being complicit in the perpetuation of transphobia through transfake castings of his work.
In February 2023, when the play received its Canadian premiere in Toronto, the role of Mia was played by a trans actor. In 2021, after initially casting a cis actor in the role of Mia, a production in Wellington, New Zealand, changed the casting and cast a trans performer in response to concerns raised by the trans community. In 2019, when the play was performed in Arizona, USA, a non-binary actor, Kevin Cantor, performed the role of Mia and worked directly with the playwright Andrew Bovell to update the language in the script.
In an interview, Andrew Bovell discussed his experience writing and updating the piece.
We had a very frank and helpful discussion, and Kevin helped me firstly to ensure that the play reflected that this wasn't a journey from maleness to femaleness, that Mia has always been a woman. It's just that she is just now moving towards being able to live openly as a woman.
The changes made to the text were subtle and nuanced, but spoke directly to and were informed by the experience of trans people. Tropes, such as trans people being born in the wrong body, were removed altogether.
Although this is not an exhaustive list of all recent productions, and there have been other contemporary productions that have continued to do transfake casting, the productions referred to previously serve to highlight a shift in the conversation which is informed by the trans community directly. A culture of best practices developed by trans cultural workers regarding trans cultural representations is growing internationally and needs to be implemented in the Portuguese cultural sector.
The Lisbon Players have been considering a production of Things I Know to Be True since 2020, when the initial question of trans inclusion was raised to them. In their call-outs for the current production, released in 2022, the language used to present the casting was defined as gender non-specific rather than explicitly trans. In this casting call, a cis person, Ricardo Francisco Jacob, was chosen for the role. Following the interventions of trans activists and comments of trans people and allies online, the Lisbon Players released a call-out specifically looking for trans performers.
This last call-out came very close to the final production dates, leaving the trans actor with the task of learning the script and rehearsing a physical theatre performance with less than a month's time to prepare, in contrast to the 3 months of rehearsal that had already been undertaken by the rest of the ensemble.
The role was also unpaid, which we understand is the practice within the Lisbon Players as an amateur theatre company. Yet, given the tight production schedule and the reality that trans people are notoriously kept out of access to employment as an extension of systemic oppression, it's of little surprise that the Lisbon Players failed to find any trans applicants to the open call. This care and sensitivity about the reality of trans experience was shared with them prior to the new open call, but was not heard and was not taken into practice.
In the end, the Lisbon Players changed nothing about their initial Transfake casting and failed to take accountability for the harm that Transfake casting does towards the trans community. There is a systemic response in their behaviour, one that consistently denies the inner worlds of trans people, the ability of trans people to speak of and know their own experiences, and denies a history of trans activism and struggle. Despite refusing to listen to and respond to the concerns of trans people, the Lisbon Players firmly believe that they, as cis people, know what's best regarding the needs of trans people. They have stated that they unequivocally stand with the trans community, their struggles and journeys, yet do not realise this in practice.
The Lisbon Players claim they have done everything they can to reach the trans community. Yet, they failed to do adequate outreach, which included voices from the trans community. They failed to do adequate research regarding other productions of the play. They failed to adjust their practices in response to trans critiques. And they did this all in spite of a growing culture of trans resistance against transfake casting in Lisbon over the last 2 years. They failed to consider how their actions created an ambience of hostility towards the very trans community they were trying to engage. They stayed stagnant in the arrogance of their cis privilege, gaslighting and writing off trans critique as censorship.
In their public statement, the Lisbon Players embody a cultural understanding of theatre as nothing more than an illusion, stating that theatre is an illusion and actors portray people they are not. The Lisbon Players fail to imagine how this sentiment can apply to a trans actor, detransitioning with prosthetics to perform a role pre-transition, the casting of a cis actor in a trans role, even if pre-transition, suggests that trans identities aren't real and can be achieved with just having a cis person in drag.
The cultural understanding of theatre as nothing more than an illusion fails to understand how art is a consequence and a reflection of the times and social conditions in which it is produced. Theatre is a dialogue and, like all things, is inherently political. The choice to represent a trans role with a cis performer is a political act. It engages in a politics of representation, the representation of hegemonic norms and sensibilities. Under the hegemonic order, cis people claim dominion over trans people, directly profiting culturally and financially from trans exclusion. Cis people enjoy a freedom of choice and expression that trans people are historically and systemically denied.
In theory, all actors could play all roles, but in practice this denies the history of oppression and inequity which defines the world we currently live in. Building towards an equitable future requires actively listening to the historically oppressed, believing them when they speak of their experience, and responding structurally to make a culture that is inclusive. Engaging in allyship work must support real, systemic change.
This is not just a struggle for representation, but a movement for the equitable inclusion of trans people in society. This necessitates cultural, social, and political transformation.
Art has political power. Transfake casting contributes to a history of exclusion of trans people from public life, access to employment, and self-representation.
Transfake is transphobia. We call you to join us in action at Teatro Bairro from April 19th to April 30th, every day in front of the theatre, until the role of Mia is recast with a trans actor.
We call for a boycott of the Transfake production of Things I Know to Be True, and demand that transfake casting be understood for what it is, an act of transphobic violence.
The action days are from the 19th to the 21st at 9 p.m. and on the 22nd and 23rd at 5:30 p.m.
And then the following week from the 26th till the 28th at 9 p.m. and the 29th and 30th at 5:30. If you want to get involved further,
get in contact and join us in struggle. Transfake is transphobia.